Greatness came to my hometown wearing cleats, pads, and helmets. Greatness shared a number. Not just any number, 44. Around the end and up the middle, you know their names: Jimmy, Ernie, Floyd, Brown, Davis, Little. Captured mid-stride down on Plaza 44, Syracuse University, keeping greatness alive.
That was a tradition. All the best backs would get to wear the 44 jersey.
Syracuse was a tough football team, tough linemen, hard-running backs. We did not have great throwing quarterbacks. And they weren't asked to throw that much. So a running back knows he's going to get the ball. Can you imagine in a relatively short period of time? Those guys all ran the football here. How many schools could have? They might have one of them. I mean.
This is a wooden lacrosse stick with Jim Brown's autograph on it.
For the hometown fans, the 44s left behind a deep impression.
Jim Brown was, I think, the greatest football player that ever played the game.
Once given the ball, he could run around people and he could run over them. But there was no stopping Jim Brown.
I just remember he was handsome and quite nice.
He would get tackled eventually, get up very slowly, walk back to the huddle.
I remember when playing with Dallas, we played him. I remember I hit him, I got a good shot on him. And he laid down for a while, everybody's back in the huddle, then he gets up, winks at me. Yeah.
There were like 6 of us in this preliminary heat.
And I actually got to meet Ernie Davis.
I noticed this one African-American athlete coming onto the field.
He was at our Mountain View Park where we used to play ball.
And he had the most muscular legs I've ever seen in my life.
And I got a chance to get his autograph.
Humongous thighs.
He was very nice, as everybody had told me.
And then I gave a good look at him, and I recognized that it was Floyd Little from Syracuse University.
And he was a good student. I knew one of his professors.
Get set, go. And I distinctly remember he took off like a bullet and literally left me in the dust.
There were stars in the community.
And James Nathaniel Brown was already well on his way to stardom at Manhasset High School on Long Island.
He actually played 5 sports: basketball, football, lacrosse, track and field, and baseball. And the Yankees looked at him as a pitching prospect. Well, he didn't play baseball, but maybe you got to wonder about how good he would have been.
Enrolling at Syracuse, Jim Brown was a non-scholarship athlete whose tuition was aided by a school alumnus.
His benefactor, so to speak, was Kenny Malloy, businessman from Manhasset, who got 44 businessmen to ante up $100 each to help Big Jim his freshman year.
Jim Brown won 10 letters at Syracuse and was an All-American in football and lacrosse.
Jim Brown was the Jim Thorpe of his time, for sure.
May 18, 1957 was drawing closer, and only Army stood in the way of a perfect lacrosse season. So Coach Roy Simmons turned to his big gun, the Manhasset Mauler, with some advice.
Jim, you got to really be perfect in this game. He says, yeah, I will, but I might be a little late. A little late? He says, well, there's a track meet first.
At the 12:30 track meet in Archbold Stadium, Brown took 2 first places and 1 second place, helping Syracuse to defeat Colgate.
Simmy's got a lacrosse game at 3 o'clock.
and then came out and had the best lacrosse game he's ever had. Scored the winning goal, put Syracuse ahead, and we stayed ahead and beat Army. So what a heroic day that was for him. And it was nothing, you know.
When greatness came to my hometown, everybody watched, everybody cheered, and one day, everybody cried. After Jim Brown graduated, Schwartzwalder handed the ball and the number to the new 44 in town, Ernie Davis, the Elmira Express. And in 1959, Coach Ben would ride that train all the way to the national championship.
Every game was a treasure, and that team was a treasure so deep that a lot of third-string running backs could have been playing for big-time teams.
With Ernie Davis around, you had a very comfortable seat on the bench.
The quarterback would fake giving it to somebody else, and Davis would come just the opposite. It was called the scissors play.
During his sophomore year, Davis carried the ball 98 times for 680 yards.
He didn't run as much through the line like Brown did, but Ernie ran around the end more. And he was a very super guy, easy to talk to.
Averaging 7 yards a carry.
He could catch a pass, he could block, he could play defense. I mean, he was fantastic.
And scoring 10 touchdowns.
And even though the team knew, I think, that they were going to run it, they couldn't stop him.
In '59, the team was absolutely fabulous against the run.
On offense or defense, you were going to have to deal with these fearsome dudes. The sizable 7.
If you're not a hitter, you're not a hard nose. And if you're not a hitter, you don't play for Benny.
Christmas and New Year's. It's a time for rocking around the Cotton Bowl. Arriving in Dallas, it's number 1 Syracuse versus number 4 Texas. Amidst the parades and festivities, things aren't quite so jolly holly. There are concerns. Ernie Davis's hamstring is barking. Would he be ready for the game?
Even though we were the number 1 team in the country, I think there was pressure on Syracuse. Maybe many people believed that an Eastern school was not going to be the best team in the country.
Those doubts were erased on the game's second play when Syracuse went for the juggler.
It was a lateral from quarterback Surratt to Gerhard Schwedes, an 80-90 yard touchdown pass to Ernie Davis.
Ernie was not in great shape. You didn't know whether he could make it to the end zone.
Throughout the game, there are racial slurs directed at Syracuse's black players.
There were a number of times when guys were tackled and whatever on the ground.
Someone spits in Syracuse fullback Art Baker's face.
There was a lot of crap going on.
There is pushing, shoving, and words, bad words.
Syracuse knew going down there and playing a Texas team that it wasn't going to be all sweetness and shake hands and let's have a fun game.
Finally, just before the half, a bench-clearing altercation on the field.
You better protect yourself.
While order is eventually restored, throughout the rest of the game, there is a tense undercurrent of racial hostility. Yet Syracuse perseveres, winning 23-14, bringing a national championship back home to Central New York. Ernie's star was just ascending. Longtime Syracuse sports journalist Bob Snyder was a first-hand witness to the Ernie Davis years. Back in 1961, he was the student assistant for Syracuse sports information director Val Pinchbeck. Ernie's chances of winning a Heisman were questionable. In 1956, Jim Brown finished a distant 5th in the Heisman balloting, as Notre Dame's Paul Hornung was the winner from a 2-8 team.
That was robbery. Unfortunately, we know the reasons for that sort of thing happening.
There was the black issue. In the office, we knew that Ernie wasn't going to get votes in the South. You know, guess why? The color of his skin. but we thought he could get some votes in the West and in the Midwest, and had to go real strong in the East and Northeast. Val worked the phones all over the country and had the respect of a lot of the great writers around the country who were voting, of course. Ernest Radford Davis won the Heisman Trophy,
becoming the first African American to be so honored. Yeah, 1962 was looking like a great year. He was a two-time All-American, got to meet President Kennedy, and via trade was acquired by the Cleveland Browns, potentially teaming him with Jim Brown in the same backfield. However, leukemia would snuff out that bright, shiny future, finally claiming his life May 18, 1963.
Everybody loved him. There was no reason not to love him. He never said a cross word. He didn't consider himself above anybody.
He was a class act. I really felt it. A very sad day.
Obviously, we were all disappointed.
God rest his soul.
The day after Ernie Davis died, Floyd Little, out of Bordentown Military Institute, committed to Syracuse.
Ernie had met Floyd, trying to recruit him, and Floyd made a promise to Ernie, and push came to shove. Floyd said, "I can't, with what happened to Ernie, I can't break that promise," and he didn't.
Little's first game at home was against Kansas in Gale Sayers.
Gale Sayers may have gotten all the pregame hype, but Floyd grabbed the postgame headlines.
Floyd went nuts.
Yeah, nuts, as in 5 touchdowns and 159 yards rushing.
Punt returns for touchdowns, kickoff returns. It was a total domination by Syracuse over a great Kansas team.
It was a foreshadowing of things to come.
On his feet, he was the quickest, fastest, trickiest runner.
One famous picture of Floyd's breaking away, and the guy's got just the end of the jersey, and Floyd's off to the races. I can't remember whether the guy ended up with a piece in his hand, but he didn't end up with Floyd.
He could do anything. Kickoff returns, punt returns, catch a pass. He was the greatest all-purpose back of the 44s, I think. He was so multi-dimensional.
The guy was 3-time first-team All-American.
During Floyd's career, he was matched up with 2 outstanding fullbacks. Jim Nance was a tough charging force. And speaking of tough, also a 2-time heavyweight collegiate wrestling champ. All-American Larry Zonka was a knock'em sock'em fullback who owned the middle of the field, converting the hard yards into big yards. So many, in fact, that his career yardage at Syracuse even surpassed the 44s. And there could have been more, when you consider he played his first 2 games as a linebacker.
Floyd could hide behind Larry, because Floyd was like, 5'8" or so, and Zonka was a big fullback. He was also a fine blocker, and Floyd could run behind him. Floyd could break tackles. He was tough to just bring down. He was low to the ground, bow-legged.
Led by quarterback Rick Casada, the 1966 team featured an exceptional backfield of Little, Zonka, and Tom Coughlin. That December, the team was defeated in the Gator Bowl 18-12 by Tennessee, a game more notable for Little's 216 plus Zonka's 114, equaling an incredible 330 yards rushing. Floyd once jokingly said It took a half a glass of blood on a Saturday morning to score touchdowns. And according to his former backfield coach Jim Ridlon, that assessment of his desire was pretty accurate.
Yeah, he was my favorite all-time player. He had that quickness, that uniqueness, but he also had a tremendous amount of heart. He wouldn't give up on you if you were behind 40 points. He'd still be running with the same energy, the same focus. He was such a genuine human being. His players loved him, the coaches loved him. He'd do anything you asked him to do. Well, I think it's great that they equate the great athlete with the great educator. So there's statues, they have Mestrovich, a great artist, a great sculpture of him on campus. It points out one thing that Syracuse does well. It celebrates excellence in every field. And that, to me, means a lot, more than anything I've ever taken away from Syracuse, is that they celebrate greatness.
Running for daylight. Man, oh man. Jimmy, Ernie, and Floyd. Back in the day, when greatness came to my hometown.